The light of the glass of Galadriel that Frodo bore glimmered and was lost, and the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last, on a night of rain, Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air, and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And then it seemed to him that, as in his dream in the house of Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turned all to silver glass and was rolled back, and he beheld white shores, and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise. Hey everyone, happy Hobbit Day, or close to, depending on when this video releases. I hope you all are doing well wherever you are in Middle-earth. Shout out to my fellow Tolkien creators as well. I'm thankful for all you all do for the Tolkien community. So thank you guys so much. Check out our Hobbit Day 2025 playlist for more great videos from all of them. Today we are discussing what might have happened to Frodo after sailing west, some of my theories and thoughts with that, and how he likely lived out the rest of his life, as he was only in his 50s when he left the shores of Middle-earth. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. Upon passing Tol Eressëa and arriving in Valinor properly, Eldamar, I believe that Frodo, along with Gandalf and the Elves, would go back through Tirion and so forth. Galadriel would reunite with her father, and Frodo would be present for all of that. And he would just meet all of these elves, being praised as, honestly, one of the great heroes that stood against the evils of Sauron, that many of the elves might have known about, or at least remembered from who Sauron was in the Elder Days. Then I believe Frodo would actually probably be taken to the Council of the Valar, and the only wizard to actually complete his task would report what had happened in Middle-earth, and how instrumental the hobbits had been, as Gandalf relayed the end of his mission to the Valar. Now, one thing I've always wondered about is, would Gandalf maintain his old appearance for the rest of Frodo's life, right? Or would he take on the form that he had been as Aloran, before he became a wizard, ultimately? I'm not sure, to be honest. It's very possible that he would maintain his old appearance for the rest of just Frodo's life and Bilbo's life, just to give them that sort of comfort and familiarity. It's very possible. The Valar would, of course, praise Frodo's deeds and how his courage and the courage of his fellow hobbits led to the end of one of Morgoth's greatest lieutenants and some of the remainder of his evil, and helped pass the world on into what it was meant to be in the Fourth Age. And perhaps even as part of their own reward for him, they might even give him some knowledge of the origin and histories of hobbits, Tom Bombadil and more knowledge about him, and other questions Frodo might have had about the world. Perhaps the Valar would have answered them. After all of this, I believe Frodo would go to stay with Irmo and Este in Lorien to heal his Morgul wound and Shelob wound. We can't forget that a big part of the reason Frodo left Middle-earth and went into the West was because he just had many wounds physically and emotionally that could not simply be healed, even with a great amount of time in Middle-earth. But if they could be healed somewhere, it would be in Valinor. So I think even the Valar would not fully be able to mend all hurts, mental and otherwise. Like Arda being forever marred by Melkor's evils, so too does it seem to me that Frodo would be scarred by Sauron's ring and his whole experience, but Valinor would be the happiest place for him to live and actually receive the best sort of healing, and I believe he would be happy here. He and Bilbo would probably visit the different elven cities, Alqualande, Avalone upon Tol Eressëa, Tirion, the city of the Noldor, and Valimar, the city of the Vanyar, and would probably go into the different realms of the Valar themselves. Bilbo would likely build more poems, if he could, about the Valar and Eärendil being that close to the Star Mariner. And again, Frodo ultimately would be happier here than anywhere else he might have been upon Middle-earth. But he would still long for his friends and miss the Shire. Perhaps such feelings and emotions would even teach the Elves, and maybe even the Valar, some of what it meant to be of mortal kind and to hail from Middle-earth as a mortal. Because again, when we look at Valinor, when we think about if mortal men should have ever been able to step foot on Valinor, it's really an interesting thing because the Valar tried to keep mortals away. Obviously, the Númenóreans invaded during that time, and then Frodo, Bilbo, eventually Sam, Gimli, if you could count Gimli amongst... He's obviously mortal in lifespan, but not like men and hobbits. He's set aside. But still, even Gimli, I feel like they really tried to keep those that were not deathless away from the lands of the deathless, but here we have quite an exception to that. So I do imagine Frodo probably would have taught them a lot of kind of the hobbitish and mortal experience, and it would be interesting for them to understand what longing meant, and that no matter what, Frodo would still miss parts of Middle-earth and the Shire and so forth. But again, it would be best for him here. Bilbo would eventually pass away, and Frodo would live to see that. The first mortal death in Valinor, which would probably give all the deathless a new look at the world and life and so forth, and a better understanding of Eru Ilúvatar and his will. Of course, this would be an incredibly tough moment for Frodo, losing Bilbo, but I think Gandalf would always just be there to comfort him. And I think Gandalf would feel that sense of duty to honestly remain quite close to Frodo, no matter what, because, I mean, Frodo and Bilbo went on the adventures that he had kind of arranged in many ways for them, and because, I don't know, not many others in Valinor really knew what the late Third Age had been like, I think Gandalf would see, like, he's the connection between these deathless and immortal ones and these little hobbits who would certainly make friends, but would probably still need his guidance and wisdom and friendship as well. So Gandalf would help Frodo through everything. And I must imagine that Frodo overall would still feel out of place a bit amongst the High Elves and the Valar and the Maiar, even those that returned from Beleriand and sailed west, the elves that had been in Middle-earth and come back, all of that. But he would be reminded that for his deeds, Frodo had earned a place among all of them. Perhaps it would be Tuor, who became one among the Eldar, or Finrod Reborn, that would remind him of that, because I imagine they would all tell of their different adventures. Now, as the years pressed on, Frodo would live to see his friend Sam come west, guided by the winds of Manwë and the waters of Ulmo, and the two would dwell together until they too passed, and were of course celebrated upon immortal lands. Like Frodo and Bilbo, Sam would be hailed a hero, and being one of the ring-bearers, he was welcome there. In the end, however, it is sad to note that Frodo would definitely not live to see Legolas and Gimli again, because even though they sailed west, it was only after the death of Aragorn that they did so, and Aragorn ruled for quite a lot of time, and so Frodo and Sam would have been gone by then. However, when Frodo and Sam would pass in the west, because again, it doesn't make them immortal, even though the lands themselves are deathless and for the deathless, these two hobbits, three, counting Bilbo, would go beyond the circles of the world, reuniting with Pippin, Merry, and probably Aragorn again in the fates of mortal kinds. Perhaps Gimli too, but again, dwarves have a fate set aside from men and hobbits, it seems. So, yeah, I mean, that's really it. I think Frodo would have the most peaceful and healing and magical experience in his retirement after The Lord of the Rings. And these are just some of the smaller, more specific instances that I imagine Frodo would go through. It may be that Sam also brought Sting back to Valinor, and maybe they got more of an understanding from one of the elves of Gondolin about where that came from or whose weapon that was. Just all these little small stories that I feel like could have happened in Valinor. Who knows? But let me know in the comments below, what do you all think? Are there other things that I forgot to mention that Frodo likely would have gone through, or some story that would have involved him after going west? Let me know. From this tale, we see that nothing is ever truly at an end. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to me muse on Frodo's fate and potential fates. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. Happy Hobbit Day once again. Check out that playlist my friends have made for more. If you'd like to support the channel, we have a partnership with Mythologie Candles through the link below. Use code Men of the West for 10% off that first order, or check out CastleCon's Lord of the Rings replicas and use the code WEST at checkout, and please check out our merch. Join our memberships and Patreon for access to our Discord server and our monthly podcast, and take a look at Masters of Mythology, our second channel on myths and legends. Thanks to our Valor Tier patrons and YouTube members for keeping us afloat. Joby Weasel, Ed Patterson, ComicNut64, Zoomi, Peter Sheppard, thank you all so much. Don't forget to subscribe to join the Men of the West, and my friends, thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.